This is a Pompeii worm that lives by the volcanic hot vents of the deep sea. It can survive in boiling water. And this is what a firefighter's suit might look like if it used the same secrets the Pompeii worm uses to keep cool. And we're going to see how they could inspire a new generation of super cool fire suits. If you put your hand in boiling water, you get scalded pretty quick. Ouch. And that's how lobsters are cooked too, in boiling water, turning bright orange. Fun fact, it's because the heat causes the orange protein called astaxanthin to separate out. And that's pretty much what happens to all animal tissue when it's heated above about 40 centigrade or 100 Fahrenheit. Essential proteins unravel and the fat around cells melts and ruptures. But there's one creature known as the hottest on Earth, this Pompeii worm, that can survive boiling water and live another day. These incredible worms live around volcanic vents on the seabed, some of which have towering chimney stacks called black smokers. As well as the intense heat, those billowing clouds from the black smokers are highly toxic, more acidic than battery acid. They contain mainly particles of iron sulfide, but also deadly heavy metals like lead and arsenic. And yet, in many places, life thrives here. And the Pompeii worm is the most resilient of them all. Amazingly, it can survive for a short while at temperatures of up to 105 centigrade without kicking the bucket. So, how does it do this? Let's explore its superpowers. The temperature inside the smoker is hotter than boiling oil, up to 400 degrees centigrade. But the tubes themselves are about an inch thick, so the temperatures on the outside are quite a bit less. Even so, it's pretty amazing how the Pompeii worm copes with this environment. First off, the worm has a symbiotic relationship with so-called extremophile bacteria. These bacteria, which thrive in extreme conditions and temperatures, form a woolly fleece on the worm's back, and in return it's thought the worm feeds them with mucus, secreted from special glands on the dorsal side. But why does the worm want to get itself into such hot water in the first place? The answer is that the hot water will break down those toxic chemicals I mentioned earlier and make them easier to cope with, and may also allow the worm to feed. And it's most recently been suggested on yummy patches of sulfur bacteria that form mats around the vents. Those red feathery bits are its gills which it breathes through, but underneath is a mouth, which has been seen to have some crumbs, leftovers of bacterial mats around it. But those more filament-like bacteria on its back help protect the worm from the intense heat. And these special bacteria won't go away because they can repair themselves and their proteins inside when they're damaged by heat. And it's not just for show. It's thought that they help make tiny currents that keep the worm cool, and their shape greatly increases surface area, dissipating heat. But that's not the only heat shield the Pompeii worm uses. It lives in an ingenious protective tube that it builds around itself. It's made of at least 4 separate layers, each with fibres going in different directions, like plywood, and it's glued together with more bacteria, mucus and minerals in between. This tube helps it manage the extreme temperatures between its tail, which stays close to the hot vent side, and its head, which remains in cooler deep sea water. So while the side of the black smoker chimney might be 100 degrees plus centigrade, the water just a few inches away is only about 2 centigrade. Because without volcanic energy, the deep sea is very cold in itself. This great temperature difference likely helps to move cool water around the tube too, as cool water sinks and hot water rises. And the worms can also move up and down inside, apparently pumping cold water inwards. By the way, this heat energy is partly why there are many strange animals found around the vents in the deep sea in the first place. In this dark world, energy is in short supply, but these strange deep-sea creatures have learnt to cope with such a seething, toxic and boiling environment to survive and thrive. Normally, the Pompeii worm does best at about 50 centigrade, its comfort zone, but it can cope with much higher temperatures for a short while. That's why the worms are most often found in the coolest part of the chimneys, which are at the top. Volcanic vents are normally stable for long enough for the worms to reach old age, but everything can change quite quickly, with sudden collapses or new holes releasing excessively hot water. When that happens, the Pompeii worm's adaptions come in handy. So, how could we imagine a new type of firefighter suit based on all these fantastic designs from nature, or by using what's called biomimicry? Well, we could make the suit fleecy for a start, with projections on the back to get rid of heat and circulate small currents. Extremophile bacteria that absorb heat might even be injected in large numbers into the protective fire suit. And the tubes of Pompeii worms are a matrix of twisted polymer layers, each containing sulfur and metal minerals from the black smokers. So the materials in a firefighter suit could be made of something similar, giving the same chemical stability the worm's tubes have to survive the heat. Inside this imagined cross-section of our biomimicking firefighting suit, there would also be water channels. A clever passive system where temperature differences across the suit between hot and cool spots, front and back, would tend to pump cool water around the suit, as might be happening down the worm's tube, with one end hot against the stack and the other cool in deep sea waters. Some of these principles already exist in suits, but it's been shown that every little bit you can cool down a firefighter's suit helps, as even at modest temperatures, your ability to think declines rapidly. And in the inside of a burning building, being able to stay for a little longer can mean the difference between life and death. And that's not the only bit of biomimicry the Pompeii worm has been noticed for. It's also been studied to see if its adaptions can provide methods to cool down small satellites in space that get very hot. So this sort of biomimicry might lead to other heat-shielding uses. The Pompeii worms are found worldwide on hydrothermal vents at depths around 8,000 feet. And because they are so inaccessible and live in the dark at such extremes, there's still much to learn about them. Did you know, for example, there are male and female Pompeii worms? They reproduce through direct contact, a bit like barnacles, and with their eggs stored internally to avoid getting cooked by the vent's hot water. Although these worms are sometimes quite old, when volcanic activity changes and the hot vents move, their entire community dies off. Dead worm fossils have even been found by long-defunct black smokers. Relics of an ancient past, a bit like the Roman Pompeii that was covered by the ashes of Vesuvius, and is the Pompeii worm's namesake. As I say, these worms are found on seabeds stretching across whole oceans, so how do their larvae travel and settle on new vents thousands of miles away? That's still a mystery waiting to be uncovered by deep-sea explorers, making sure the sea holds many more secrets for years to come. Ones, of course, we'll look into again in depth, here on Induna.